Welcome to the Sad Bounce podcast. I'm John Luck with Mary Evers as we look back at the career of number 11, Julian Edelman, who announced his retirement in a pretty well put together piece at Gillette Stadium.
Yeah.
This shouldn't really come as a surprise, I don't think, to anybody, maybe a year too soon, but in that 4-minute video, Edelman said, quote, "It was a hard decision, but the right decision for me and my family, and I am honored and so proud to be retiring a Patriot. It's been the best 12 years of my life. Nothing in my career has ever come easy, and no surprise, this isn't going to be easy either. I've always said I'll go until the wheels come off, and they finally have fallen off. Due to an injury last year, I'll be making my official announcement of my retirement from football."
Yeah.
And I think this was kind of like what happened with Dustin Pedroia as far as the
Mhm.
knee, or as far as the bone on bone in the knee. Um,
Right.
I mean, just from Edelman's size, it's not really that surprising he's retiring. But
Yeah.
like I said, I think it may be just a year too soon, but still, nonetheless,
Yeah.
a very impressive career for the 232nd overall pick.
I really wasn't expecting him to retire this year. And I think what happened that day when he retired was it was announced. I think it was Ian Rappaport. I can't remember. Said that the Patriots had terminated his contract because of a failed physical. And of course, we later found out that that was more or less of a they knew he was retiring, so they were going to cut him. And but the way the information came out was like uncomfortable because I think for a couple minutes there I was like, I can't believe they're gonna do that to Julian Edelman. Like I know he's not healthy, but come on, like even the Red Sox hung on to Pedroia for a long time after he clearly wasn't feasible as a player anymore.
Too
But
long.
right, oh sure, it was definitely too long. So I was, I felt a little better about it when he announced his retirement. And honestly, good for him being able to go out on his own terms. Like if he had played this year, it probably would have ended up he probably would have ended up even more hurt and it would have just the decision would have been made for him. This way he can, go out like I said on his own terms and it won't be something that's completely surprising and it's, you know, the Patriots did a bunch in this offseason at the with receivers, with both wide receivers and tight ends. So it wasn't like if he had retired last year, he really would have been leaving them in the lurch because they really had no receivers. But it feels a little better doing it this year. And of course, now the narrative is going to be, oh, is he going to pull a Gronk and pretend to be too injured to play, even though he's going to end up in Tampa Bay with Tom Brady next?
Well, Mary just covered the first three topics of the show,
Oh,
but
sorry.
I we'll talk a little more about each bullet point.
Okay.
But just to get back to what you said about the Patriots and maybe each side doing the other a favor, Julian
Yeah.
Edelman failing his physical and the Patriots terminating his contract because of that meant that he could collect $2 million. So I think there was a little bit of
Ah,
a settlement issue there. The Patriots doing
gotcha.
Edelman a solid, Edelman doing the Patriots a solid by retiring now because the Patriots can go out there, maybe look for another wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you need to look for anybody the caliber of Julian Edelman. I don't know if
Sure.
you can find anybody the caliber of Julian Edelman,
Yeah.
but just someone just kind of supplement the wide receiving depth chart. Because, like you said, the Patriots, they spent money like Richie Rich. Their wide receiving depth chart right now, their first few receivers include Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, N'Keal Harry, Jacoby Myers, Gunnar Olszewski. But the tight end, to me, that's where this offense is going to be predicated on
Yeah.
Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Devin Asiasi, and Dalton
Mhm.
Keene. Uh, to me, I think Julian Edelman was kind of that player that you didn't expect him to make as big of an impact as he made. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but
Yeah.
you go back and look at some of the plays that he made, and in my eyes, I think those are plays that only he could make.
Oh,
Super
sure.
Bowl 51, the comeback against the Falcons, Super Bowl 49, the game, the game leading touchdown in the final few minutes. You had that throw that he made to Danny Amendola in the
Mhm.
divisional round against Baltimore that I think probably caused an earthquake in Gillette Stadium.
Yeah.
Those are the plays that I think only Julian Edelman could make.
Mhm.
And don't forget, this guy, you hear it a lot. He was going to be he was a quarterback in college, and they didn't really know what to do with him when he was drafted by the New England Patriots. He was the punt
Yeah.
returner, and in a preseason game, he ran a punt back, and that I think maybe put his foot in the door a little bit to remain on the roster. But
Right.
I think everyone's going to talk about the really weird relationship with Tom Brady because you can call it a bromance, you can call it a creepy bromance, but
Yeah.
Julian Edelman and Tom Brady were inseparable.
Right.
as teammates here in New England.
Yeah, I completely. I mean, when you're a quarterback and a wide receiver, especially when you're the top wide receiver, having a good relationship is, you know, key to being successful on the field. Because if they can, if they know each other so well that they can really communicate without having to necessarily talk to each other, that's going to mess with defenses, and no one's going to be able to protect that. And I think that's exactly what happened in their careers, especially in the playoffs. Because, while Julian Edelman's obviously a very good player, but I think the argument can be made that he's always been a better player in the playoffs than he is in the regular season. Because for one, I mean, he was not always completely healthy in the regular season. I think I heard that he only played all 16 games, 5 of the 12 seasons that he was in New England. So obviously there was always some health issues, but the reason why there were health issues was because he was one of those players that was willing to put his entire body on the line for his team to succeed. And that, I believe, is why, he endeared himself so much to Bill Belichick, because Bill Belichick's favorite players are the guys that will put 150% into not only learning the game, but, working out and putting that much effort and energy into the team as a whole, not just as a sport, but as like a group of people. So, I everyone will always complain about the relationship Belichick had with Brady and whether or not Brady was putting as much effort in. I don't think you'll ever hear something like that when you come to when it comes to Belichick and Edelman. I think, like, when it comes down to it, Julian Edelman has probably been one of Bill Belichick's favorite players to coach in his entire career.
And deep down, I don't think Julian Edelman wanted to be one of these guys that turns into a wide receiver that plays 2 or 3 games a year. Like you said,
Right.
his ability to stay on field was, I think, going to be the one thing that goes as a strike on his career. Looking at his stats
Mhm.
right now, there's 1, 2, 3 seasons that he played 16 games. One season
Oh,
he
it's only
played
3.
15. That was his second year in the league. So he had 7 receptions on 14 targets.
Yeah.
But don't forget, this was a guy that came back from an ACL injury. He was
Mhm.
also suspended for 4 games because he did PEDs. So
Yeah.
to me, I think there's going to be some question on how Julian Edelman is looked at
Right.
by a broader fan base, if you will, because
Yeah.
in New England Patriots' minds, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Eh, yeah.
But you talked about this a little bit earlier on, the fact that maybe there's a possibility he pulls a Rob Gronkowski, goes down south. This was something that Mike Florio actually talked about for NBC Sports Pro Football Talk, saying
Yeah.
that Edelman could still return. Retirements, as we've learned time and again, aren't binding, even when announced by a video that creates the clear impression that one, he's done, and two, he'd never play for any team other than the Patriots. Less
Yeah.
than 2 weeks ago, Edelman posted an April Fool's gag about joining Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. Would anyone be shocked if that happens? Sure, he said in the retirement video that the wheels will come off just last week. However, the Boston Herald reported that it's doubtful Edelman will be able to play a full 2021 season. The Buccaneers don't need him now. They don't need him in August or September or October or November. He could join the team for the stretch run to get up to speed with the goal of contributing in the playoffs, and he could then add to his postseason legacy, maybe even with another Super Bowl MVP award. And to me, I kind of go back to what the Buccaneers did with Antonio Brown. Different set of
Yeah.
circumstances, but a Tom Brady favorite target comes in late October, early November. He's there for the stretch run. And
Yeah.
I think if Edelman goes to Tampa Bay with Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady, maybe a few receptions, but I think it makes the Tampa Bay Buccaneers better. But what does that do to his legacy here?
Yeah.
Because we've seen people already start to trash Rob Gronkowski's legacy
Mhm.
for retiring, being gone for a year, and then going back to Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like obviously if there was going to be a situation where Julian Edelman comes out of retirement, it's going to be with Tampa Bay. I completely agree with that point. However, I think the circumstances surrounding Julian Edelman's personal life make it a little bit difficult to make that decision because, he's the father of a young daughter. Him and his daughter's mother are not together. Unlike Tom Brady, who, obviously he has a kid with a woman he's not together with, but their situation is more solid. And Rob Gronkowski is, dating somebody but not married and doesn't have any kids. So it's easier for him to just be like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna pick up and do this. Where with Julian Edelman, he's got to put his family before, you know, what he does with his career at this point. He can't just pick up and say, you know what, I'm going to move to Florida, because 9 times out of 10, the kid's not going to come with him because it's going to be with his mother. So I don't see Julian Edelman just, deciding to pick up and go to Florida just for the hell of it. And I think that, like you said, if it does happen, it probably won't be until like week 16. Like if Tampa Bay knows they're going to go into the playoffs, they'll probably pick him up. However, Tampa Bay has a lot of receivers right now, so I don't know even if they would have the space for him. I think someone would have had to get injured for them to take the chance on Julian Edelman.
Yeah, and that's why I look at this from a football standpoint more than a personal standpoint. Obviously, family means a lot, but just look at it from a depth chart in Tampa Bay. You look at what they have for wide receivers: Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, Tyler Johnson. So right now, Julian Edelman, if he were to sign with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he would be at best the fifth receiver.
Right.
And what does that get you? Maybe a couple of receptions and an empty set. But the Tampa Bay offense, I don't think, is set up to work for what Brady, Gronk, and Edelman have, because Tampa Bay, I think they're made for the 15, 20, 25-yard passes. But
Yeah.
Gronk, Brady, and Edelman are made more for those dink and dunk short yard
Yeah.
passes that get you barely a first down. I don't know. Tampa Bay's offense could work Julian Edelman in there. I
Mhm.
think at maybe the best case scenario, maybe he goes to Tampa Bay as a coach, kind of like what Wes
Yeah.
Welker did with the Houston Texans, works with the receivers for Tampa Bay, tries to get them in sync with what Tom Brady expects from their days in New England.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what he does in this next chapter of his career, because he's, one of those guys that's such a public figure that I don't think he's just going to retire into the sunset and do something else. I see him sticking around football for a while to come, and whether it's a coach or an analyst or what have you, I think he'll be. I don't see him leaving the New England area, to be honest with you. If he does, I assume he'll go back to California, where he's was born and raised and his parents are. So I guess we'll see what happens, what he decides to do.
Yeah, I think he's going to probably go to Fox, because obviously he would be in California. They're in California.
Fair. I
Short
mean,
trip down the road.
it makes sense.
All right. Is Julian Edelman an NFL Hall of Famer? This is a
Yeah.
question that I go back to because I could make a case for either side, yes and no.
Yeah. I mean, if they had a Hall of Fame that was specifically for playoff careers, I would say, yeah, 100% he is. But I don't think he was as productive or as a stable of a player in the regular season to end up in the Hall of Fame. I mean, you're not going to talk, like, despite the fact that he's like number 2 to Jerry Rice in playoff receptions, he's not the caliber player that Jerry Rice was. So I really don't see him becoming a Hall of Famer.
See, I feel like the NFL voters and the NFL Hall of Fame voters are going to look more at his playoff ability. Now, I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do, but
Yeah.
as you said just now and before, it comes down to what he's done in the regular season. In the regular
Right.
season, he's had seasons that he's taken off. 1, 2, 3, yeah, 3 seasons with 1,000+ yards receiving. Those are
Yeah.
Hall of Fame caliber numbers.
Sure.
Unfortunately, 2018, he had 850 yards receiving in
Hmm.
12 games. In 2015, 692 yards in 9 games. That's going to be the thing that goes on Edelman's record, along with those
Right.
PED suspensions that we talked about, the missed year due to the ACL. Unfortunately, Julian Edelman was just a victim of circumstances. He was the
Yeah.
232nd overall pick. Not many people expected a lot out of him. Made the biggest catch, I think, in Super Bowl
Oh,
history.
sure. Yeah.
Made the biggest throw by a non-quarterback in Super Bowl history. Those are going to get him in. Do I think he belongs in?
Yeah.
Maybe. I think he'd
Yeah.
have to do a little bit of arm twisting. But like you said, his what he's done on the football field has been impressive. You throw him around with names like Michael Irvin and Jerry Rice. He's tied with Irvin for 6 postseason games with 100+ receiving yards and only 2 games behind Jerry Rice. When you think about that, Rice, Irvin,
Right.
Edelman,
Yeah.
I think that's probably what punches his ticket to Canton.
Unfortunately, I also think that the discussion's going to be coming. The discussion that comes up is going to be that discussion that we've been having for over a year now. Does he do that without Bill Belichick as coach? Tom Brady was able to go to Tampa Bay and prove that he could be that quarterback without Bill Belichick as coach, but Julian Edelman might not get the chance to. And then you could also have to put in the thing was, well, would he, even if Belichick wasn't his coach, would he have done it without Brady as his quarterback? Because you have the greatest quarterback of all time and the greatest coach of all time with you your entire career. It's hard to sit there and say that everything you accomplished was just what your talent, because I honestly, like, as much as I love Julian Edelman, I don't think it is just his talent, because like you said, he was a quarterback coming out of college. You don't become this electric wide receiver overnight without someone like Bill Belichick and Tom Brady in your corner. You just don't.
And also, you think about what he'd be up against as far as other Hall of Fame caliber players.
Mhm.
Hines Ward is named. I've seen tossed around. I don't know if they're in the same draft class or not, but Steve Smith I know is up for a Hall of Fame induction next year. Anquan Bolden, Andre Johnson, and I think now you're going to start seeing more receivers, because now we're starting to see the transition from the old days where it was the running back game and a quarterback
Yeah.
with the traditional offenses. Now it's more to the pass first
Yeah.
offense. And I mean, if Andre Johnson and Anquan Bolden get in, I think that makes it a little easier for Julian Edelman to get in. But if you're
Sure.
telling me
Yeah.
those two don't get in, I don't know if Edelman gets into the Hall of
Yeah.
Fame.
I agree.
All right, so that's one part of the Patriots news making of the past week. The other is
Mhm.
the Patriots players skipping OTAs. They came out with a statement that I think is pretty uniform with what the rest of the league came out saying. In solidarity with other players across the NFL and in the interest of our health and safety, many of us at the New England Patriots will be exercising our right to not attend voluntary workouts this offseason.
Mhm.
The NFL has yet to agree to the full details of a plan for players, despite the fact we are a few short days away from the start of voluntary workouts.
Yeah.
The threat of COVID-19 is still serious in our community and across the country, and we think it is safer for everyone if we choose to work out on our own.
Right.
And I mean, okay, it's great to see the players are really concerned about COVID-19,
Yeah.
but listening to Boston Sports Radio, I tend to agree with them a little bit. What are they going to do? Are they going to go to a, Planet Fitness type of thing where they're in a gym with
Right.
other people? Are they going to be at home where they're on a Zoom workout?
Right.
That to me is the big question when we talk about what these players are going to do instead of being at a voluntary OTA.
Right. What we're going to see is exactly what we saw right after the Patriots made all those signings. Jarrett Stidham was in California and all these new receivers were suddenly with him. And then, Cam Newton saw this and was like, oh shit, I better show up so I can make sure I get my job back this year. It's going to be something like that. I mean, we see it every season with, the quarterback runs his own workouts with the receivers that he's going to be working with that year. It's every quarterback in the league does it. And that's what you're going to be seeing them on their own doing workouts. And whether or not, they're taking more precautions to be safer from COVID than, the team would, which I find hard to believe. Um, but it is, less people, and where voluntary OTAs would probably be, you know, the entire, for the most, I mean, with the Patriots, it's almost always the entire team, with the exception of a couple of years. So, you know, I I don't really know. I feels like maybe that they're just trying to remind the NFL that they still have some power in the situation with, the addition to the 17th game of the season and other things going on. That's all it seems like to me. I mean, I feel like there's not going to there's only going to be slight difference between the threat of COVID-19 during voluntary workouts than there are when the mandatory workouts start.
I think this were any other year, and you can throw the Tom Brady years in there as well. I
Yeah.
think the Patriots would not really be affected by this, but this is a big year for the Patriots coming up.
Mhm. Yeah,
You're
I
going, you're
agree.
coming off of a 7-9 football year or football season in 2020. It was unique. We understand that, but
Mhm.
look at what this team looked like a couple years ago to what they look like now.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, you're talking about an offense predicated on Tom Brady, Julian Edelman, James White, and everyone just kind of fill in the rest of the blanks.
Yeah.
Now it's Cam Newton, really an unproven quarterback for the New England Patriots, a
Mhm.
wide receiving core that we talked about, including Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, N'Keal Harry is probably going to be your number 3 receiver. Jacoby Myers, I think James White's coming back,
I feel
but
like
the tight,
I think Jacoby Myers will be your number one. Your number 3 receiver
yeah, it's
over
probably
Harry.
Yeah, it's going to be a training camp thing where they kind of jockey for position. But
Yeah.
to me, I think the two people this really impacts is the two new tight ends, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, because they're
Right.
going to receive a boatload of the offensive yards coming up in 2021.
I mean, yeah, I agree, but I also think that they're probably some of those players that are like, not ready to leave California yet. It's too cold in New England. I don't want to come yet. Let me know when it's June.
It's too cold in New England. It's not
I
that
know.
cold. So what if there's April snow showers that amount to a foot of snow in the Pioneer Valley? Get over it. Just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, there are other teams that have skipped voluntary OTAs, including Seattle, Detroit, Denver, Tampa Bay.
Yeah. Well, obviously Tampa Bay is because Tom Brady does not do OTAs anymore. He is above OTAs. We've known that for 5 or 6 years now.
But I think ultimately what this could come down to is something you brought up, and that is kind of this big chess match because the owners went ahead and did the 17 game season. Maybe this is kind of that little ear earbug or earworm in the back of the owner's heads. You know what? We still kind of have a little bit of power on the
Yeah.
player's side. We can still kind of dictate what goes on. So I
Right.
think maybe that's what's going on here. It could also be the fact of COVID. So there's a whole wide
Yeah.
range of things that this could be all about.
Yeah.
So let's go from the New England Patriots to the Boston Red Sox as
Yeah.
my co-host is kind of doing two things at once.
I know I'm kind of watching the game while we're doing this. It's fine. It's fine. It's I'm paying attention to what you're saying. I
Hey,
swear.
98.5 can make it work for their midday and afternoon shows. We can make it work here on Out of Bounds.
Yeah, I think we can. We're fine.
Okay, we'll find out. Let's start off with Rafael Devers as the Red Sox have turned things around after losing their first 3 games. They went on to win the next 9, the first team to
Yeah.
do that. And to me, I think where this really started off with is Rafael Devers turning things around
Mhm.
after his first 5 games, batting 105, no home runs, 5
Yeah.
strikeouts, and 1 RBI. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any type of communication in the dugout, but I think we know where things turned around. And
I think
it's
so
all
too.
thanks to Out of Bounds. Devers, wow.
He's
he
not
is having
doing-
such a rough start.
Yeah, because his defense is terrible too. But that's been something he's been dealing with for seasons now.
Yeah, you talked about that last week. That was
Yeah.
going to be something to watch. But
Mhm.
if I have this right, Rafael Devers is 1 for 19
Yeah.
with an RBI, 2 walks, and 5 Ks. 2-year deal.
Rafael Devers just hit a home run. As we're sitting here shitting on him, he hits a home run. Cool.
I'll show you.
Yeah. He's got the only live feed of Out of Bounds today.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. I love that.
Jason Tatum has Kendrick Perkins. Rafael
Yeah.
Devers has Mary and myself. You're welcome,
I mean,
Red Sox
it was
Nation.
instantaneous. He hit a home run right while we were like talking shit about him.
I think that's impressive, actually, by us. But
He's up to bat right now.
okay. I don't know if we can legally give play-by-play of a Red Sox game, but
I
while
don't think
he's
we
at the
can.
dish, apparently, let's talk about what he's done since that
Okay.
rough start. 279 batting average, 5 home runs, tied for third in Major League Baseball, 12 RBI, fourth in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
To me, the issue with Devers isn't the fact of him at the plate; it's him in
No.
the field.
Oh,
Because we saw
100%.
in the Baltimore series, and we've seen a little bit of that ever since.
Yeah.
He's a god awful third baseman defensively.
Oh, 100%. He can't make a throw to first base if it could kill him. And they really need to switch out him and Bobby Dahlbeck. Put Dahlbeck back at third base where he belongs and put Devers at first base.
I think you could ultimately make a case that Rafael Devers sneaks his way into the designated hitter spot. In some
Oh, fair,
cases.
because we all know that JD Martinez can't stand being a DH and would prefer to be in the outfield during these games. So I don't see why they wouldn't think about doing that.
Maybe if they go down the stretch and the Red Sox are in line for a division crown, they can kind of take a few games off. Maybe that's what
Mhm.
we see Alex Cora do. Maybe play with the lineup a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happens in the playoffs if the Red Sox do end up going there. But
Yeah.
Rafael Devers is an important part of this Red Sox lineup because if you
Mhm.
have a lineup that's predicated around Bogarts, Martinez, Devers, that's very dangerous, especially with other runners that are so dangerous on the base paths, and they can really play small ball.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, this might be the time where Alex Cora takes a note out of Bruce Cassidy's playbook and just, switches up everything just for the hell of it to see if it works.
Just throw it at the wall, see what sticks.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Like, I'm pretty sure he just stands in a locker room and, like, has, like, a dartboard and is like, this is a top line tonight.
Well, what in Baltimore, in the interview room for the Red Sox, they had this random roulette wheel of different
Yeah,
teams.
whoa, that was weird. I don't understand what the hell is going on with that.
Hey,
Um,
I mean, give credit where it's due, I guess.
they also need to work better on getting him better audio for those press conferences because it sounds like he's in a tin can.
Well, it's
Like
also
Brad
the
Stevens doesn't sound like that. Bruce Cassidy doesn't sound like that. Bill Belichick, who is probably allergic to technology, doesn't sound like that. Like, please fix Alex Cora's audio.
maybe the guy in Baltimore's just having some crap cakes. Who knows? To me, I think a big part of this turnaround is the starting pitching. We saw
Right.
Nathan Eovaldi go out there on opening day and throw a relatively decent game. Unfortunately, the offense couldn't stick up for him. But
Yeah.
as we've gone through this rotation a couple of times now, to me, besides Garrett Richards, this starting rotation doesn't look too shabby for the Boston Red Sox.
It really doesn't. And even Nathan Evaldi last night said that, the fact that they're all doing so well is kind of spurring each other on. Like they're seeing how well their other counterparts in the starting pitching position are doing. They're like, oh, we gotta keep this up, we gotta keep this up. And it's manifesting into making it so all of these pitchers are like going out of their way to make sure that they keep this state up. Now, whether or not Garrett Richards can, get on board with that is yet to be seen, as he's currently losing this game as a pitcher. So we'll see.
Interestingly enough, the Red Sox are 11th in Major League Baseball for starting pitching, and you look behind
Mhm.
and you look at what they're behind as far as some of the teams go. San Diego's number one, the Mets are number three, Dodgers are four. So there are impressive teams ahead of the Red
Yeah,
Sox. But
yeah,
to me, I think the pitching, if they continue to do this, and we saw this in 2018 a little bit, the pitching staff kind of trying to one up each other, kind of making
right.
a little bit of a game out of this.
But
That's
I don't think even then the pitching staff was doing this well consecutively as they are right now. And obviously it's still the beginning of the season, so it's hard to say, but there were some like rough outings for I think it was Rick Porcello especially in 2018 that just didn't look great when it came to everyone else, and they struggled a little bit. But and like I said, it's still super early and they could still have a massive fall, which I think everyone's half expecting them to at this point. But for right now, if they can keep this up, it's going to look a lot better for them.
They need to win these types of games against
Yeah.
Minnesota, a team that's under 500. They beat the Orioles, they're under 500. Tampa Bay,
Mhm.
they're under 500. But you have a relatively tough stretch coming up because you're
Yeah.
facing Chicago for four, you're facing Toronto for two. Seattle, I don't think is anything really to sneeze at, but then you face the Mets, and God help if you get a Jacob DeGrom day.
Right,
There's going to be
right.
a lot of tough games coming up and also a lot of road games as well. The Red Sox have their longest homestand of the season coming up starting Friday night. So the
Right.
rest of the season, we still got what, May, June, July, August, 5 more months to go. The Red Sox are going
Hmm.
to have to play a lot of games on the road against a
Yeah.
lot of very tough opponents.
Yeah, and I don't even know when they start playing the Yankees. And obviously the Yankees aren't doing well right now, but I never bet against them because they always come back and they
June
won't play
4th.
them till June. Yeah, that's what I so it's gonna be like 2 months without any Yankees games. It's gonna be weird. But then you're gonna have like 100 Yankees games piled up at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested. What does the second half look like? Okay,
It's
well,
gonna
they
be
open up with four against the Yankees, three against the Blue
yeah.
Jays, four more against the. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah,
There's I think I either June or July, it's like 95% New York on their schedule, I think.
yep, the month of July. So
Yeah.
buckle up for some 7-hour Red Sox games.
Can't wait
Yay.
on every Sunday night because you know how much Sunday night baseball loves some Red Sox Yankees games. So we have to suffer through listening to Alex Rodriguez.
I mean, now he's down J-Lo, so maybe he'll
I
be a
know
little
he's gonna be in a
quieter.
bad mood now. I'd be upset if I lost J Lo.
That's a big financial hit right there.
It
But
really
nonetheless,
is.
let's talk about our expectations because the Red Sox, let's be honest, they played some rather crap bag competition in the
Mhm.
first, 12 games of the season.
Yeah.
Does the first 12 games of the season change your impression on the Red Sox and how they'll finish in the month of October?
I think what I'll give them is that they'll be a little bit more above 500 than I thought they were at the beginning of the season. I think I'm not. I refuse to become too optimistic with this team because I've been hurt before by them, and it could be one of those like those weird spontaneous 2012 2013 turnaround years for them, where the 2020 20 and the 2021 seasons are like that. But I don't see it happening, um, because I'm a pessimist to the core. So, I'm going to keep enjoying watching these Red Sox games. I've already watched more Red Sox games this season than I did last season, I'm pretty sure, because they're actually entertaining to watch. So even if they do start losing some, I still think that they're going to be entertaining to watch, which is going to be helpful, even if they're not good this season, with building back up for next season.
I think before the season started, I said I expect them to kind of be like what the late 90s, early 2000s Red Sox were.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they were competitive through most of the summertime. It was when they got
Mhm.
into the late part of the season that they started to fall apart. And I think that's what's
Right.
going to happen. You're
Yeah.
going to see Alex Cora start to rely too much on the bullpen once again. And I feel like that could hurt the Red Sox, especially when you
Mhm.
have a lot of games against the New York Yankees and that offense. Granted, the Yankees are under 500. That's not going
Yeah.
to be happening for long. Don't worry, they'll
Right.
turn things around. But I still have the Red Sox pegged for number 3 in the AL East, maybe in line for a wild card game appearance.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I think that's probably exactly where they're going to end up.
All right. Well, we've talked football. We've
Mhm.
talked baseball. Let's
Yep.
talk about my fourth favorite sport here in
Hockey?
the city of Boston. Yep, we're going to talk hockey as the Boston Bruins made quite a
I
number of
know.
trades, acquiring 3 players from Ottawa and Buffalo combined. And the big name being acquired was Taylor Hall.
Taylor Hall. Yeah.
Taylor Hall, yes, almost made
Yeah.
that screw up.
I
But
know. I screw up and say Tyler all the time.
yeah, what was it? Tyler, I think in the
It,
draft he
it
came
was
out.
Taylor Hall, Tyler Sagan. Yeah.
Yeah, so or I should say the Bruins have the top 2 picks in that draft. So
They do.
maybe
Yeah,
this
that's
one
very
can
true.
work out better.
I
Taylor
mean, the
Hall,
other one got you a Stanley Cup, but we'll see.
eh, and then it fell apart because he didn't want to wake up, but who does?
Fair
Taylor
enough.
Hall debuted against his former team, Buffalo Sabres.
Mhm.
He was on the line with David Krejci and Craig Smith.
Yep.
What did you make of Taylor Hall's first game as a Boston Bruin?
I mean, it wasn't anything fantastic. There was a back and forth of whether or not he deserved an assist on that Craig Smith goal. It looked more like a turnover to me, but I'm, like I said, a pessimist to the core. So, but he also didn't get a lot of time with the Bruins before he played. I don't think he even practiced with them, which is kind of insane to throw him out there in your second line without a practice and just kind of hope for the best, which is exactly what Bruce Cassidy did. But he also put the other 2 guys that they traded for as well in the lineup. He was just like, oh, well, if they're going to do these, we may as well use these guys and throw them out there. Of course, when it comes to the defense, they don't really have any much of a choice because they're running very, very low on defenders. But overall, I have some hope that Taylor Hall will do well here. We talked about last week how I thought that if he's finally on a team that has other talent around him that are kind of shouldering being the guy on the team, he can kind of just show up and do his thing and hope, and we all have to hope for the best. But he hasn't been playing very well this season at all. And it could just be apathy because he was playing on one of the worst teams in the NHL. But I guess we'll see as time goes on.
Overall, I think this was a big trade for the Boston Bruins. More importantly, for Taylor Hall, because I think he's
Yeah,
either a free agent after this year or
he
next
is. Yes,
season.
it's this
But
year.
this is big for Taylor Hall because now he's going to play on a team where he's not expected to be the
Right.
guy. And I didn't think this trade was going to happen because I didn't think Buffalo would trade with a team in their own
I
division. But
know.
what do I know?
Nothing, apparently.
Well, I mean, that's me in hockey, anyways. But
Fair enough.
just watching Taylor Hall on the second line with Krejci and Smith, this was his first game, I think, in about a week and a half. And
Yeah.
I think he did a good job trying to create some scoring chances for his
Mhm.
teammates. And Bruce Cassidy was very complimentary of the newest acquisitions,
Yeah.
Lazar and Hall. He actually badmouthed the players
Corrali.
on the team
Yeah.
instead of the new guys.
Yeah. Which, I mean, fair enough because they haven't been playing well. Like it's going to get to a point where, yeah, you suck at playing. Like I can't lie about this anymore and I can't make this sound pretty. You're not doing well. And everyone on that freaking fourth line deserves to be screamed at. They're terrible.
To me, I think Curtis Lazar kind of resembles your prototypical Bruins fourth liner, meaning
Mhm.
that he's not going to avoid the contact. And I think he can be that physical
Yeah.
threat, kind of like what Sean Thornton was for the past number
Ugh,
of years.
yeah.
And as far as Mike Riley goes, he looked pretty good, I think. I think he's
Mhm.
going to be important because he's that second line defender with that left
Yeah.
side shot.
Yeah.
Really, it was what? Grizzlick from the left side from the defensive core that you had, whatever you had for
And
defensive
and
core.
and Miller if he was healthy, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Kevin Miller, I'm kind of surprised that he's not being looked at by the NHL for a couple of those hits, but What do I
Yeah,
know?
that's kind of more of your stereotypical hockey player as Kevin Miller. It's just the fact that he keeps getting injured that you don't always see it. Um and then you've got Trent Frederick who keeps trying to fight every single person in the league every time he plays, but he's like I think 5'4" or something like that. He's so small compared to the rest of those guys. Um so I don't know how long that's going to work out for him just trying to fight everybody in the league, but
I think the first game for these three players was important because it was against the
Mhm.
Buffalo Sabres, a team that
Yeah.
the Bruins better beat, and they
Right.
barely beat in a shootout.
Yeah, right.
But you look at the rest of the Bruins schedule, they got 3 games remaining against the New York Islanders, 2 against
Mhm.
the Capitals, 5 against Buffalo, which
I
is
know.
really important.
Yeah.
2 games against the Penguins, 2 against the Devils, and 2 against the New York Rangers.
Mhm.
It's going to be very important, those games against the New York Islanders, because
Oh, yeah.
I think
They
the Bruins are
haven't
going to be in the playoff chase right down to the final couple of days.
I also don't have they beaten the Islanders yet this season? I don't think they have.
0-4-1 with 1 game postponed. They're
Right.
3-2-1 against the Capitals, 4-2
Yeah.
against Pittsburgh. We know how they are against the Devils, god awful 2-4, and against the Rangers they're
Yeah.
4-2. So
It's too bad they don't play Philadelphia because Carter Hart shits his pants every single time he plays the Boston Bruins.
yeah, there's no more games against the Flyers. So now the
I know.
Bruins
That
have to put
sucks for
their
them.
heads down and play.
Yeah.
There's no more chances, let out the window here. And
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how Bruce Cassidy plays the final handful of games,
Mhm.
because do you give Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand,
I
maybe a
know.
lighter workload? How do you work Pasternak in there, because he hasn't exactly looked like his top self as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you see Taylor Hall start to be a little bit more productive as time goes by, and maybe Krejci, I mean, he scored the other night. Maybe if he starts being a little bit more productive, you can start to think about giving those guys a lighter load. But with Pasternak, I think just keep playing him because he needs to work through with whatever the hell he's going through because there's some kind of block that's keeping him from scoring all of a sudden, and he needs to fix it. And I think sitting him would be detrimental to fixing that. So I think he's just got to keep playing.
All right, so that's Boston Bruins. Let's round out our look at Boston sports with the Boston Celtics, who have 17 games remaining as of this
Mhm.
recording. And they are 29-26, and they are right on the bubble of playing in that play-in series for the NBA.
Yeah.
But they have turned things around. They're on a 4-game winning streak with after what I think was the game of the year against the Portland Trailblazers, when Jason
Mhm.
Tatum had 32 points with the
Yeah.
3 biggest points at the end of the night,
Yeah.
winning 116-115. I know you're not exactly the world's biggest Celtics fan, but what have been some of your impressions?
I think that with Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart specifically, they've realized that they hadn't been playing well and they fixed themselves, which is really great. I just worry that it took the media telling them they needed to be fixed for them to get themselves together. Like, was Brad Stevens not pointing out to these people that they weren't playing very well? Because that's kind of what it seems like. Or is it just the fact that they truly don't have any respect for Brad Stevens as a coach and haven't been paying attention to them? And it took until Kendrick Perkins was calling people out for them to start playing well. And I think this brings back your point from a couple weeks ago when we didn't know if Brad Stevens was going to stay or go. Would it be better for this team to have a coach that was a former player? Because you see how Jason Tatum reacted to Kendrick Perkins, you know, I wouldn't call them slams, but he called him out for not playing up to the caliber that he was capable of. And I think that kind of proves that these young players that are on this team simply need, a coach that knows what they're going through, not someone who never played in the NBA like Brad Stevens.
So the thing with having a coach like Kendrick Perkins, if he were to be a Boston Celtics head coach,
Mhm.
it's a reactionary aspect of his job. It's
Yeah.
one thing to go ahead and go after the big guy like Jason Tatum,
Yeah.
but that was after a handful of games. Unfortunately, you had to keep your emotions in check because not every game is going to be flawless. Not every game is
Right.
going to be a win.
Well,
Would Kendrick Perkins be able to handle that? I don't think so.
I'm not saying Kendrick Perkins specifically. I'm just saying someone that has had playing experience, and like a Steve Kerr who has had success in the NBA as a player. And say what you want. Oh, maybe it was mostly because of Michael Jordan, but he's a level-headed guy that has been a successful coach and a successful player. Someone like that is what the Celtics need to finally reach the potential that Danny Ainge has said that they've had for the last 5 years.
And unfortunately, this isn't a swipe at you, but I hear a lot of people say anybody but Brad. Give me a former
Mhm.
player other than Brad.
Yeah.
Who are you going to put in
Right.
there?
And no, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know exactly the right response, but I think Danny Ainge, as the general manager, needs to start looking for someone because it's not working out with Brad Stevens. I really don't think it is.
I mean, this is a very interesting time for the Celtics because you look at what they have left on their schedule. They face the LA Lakers the night that we're recording this. They have a
Mhm.
Saturday night primetime game against Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors, and they are the true definition of hot and cold. They can go ahead
Yeah.
and give up 150 points. They can score 150 points.
Right.
Then you have a very talented Phoenix Suns team coming to the Garden,
Mhm.
followed by the Brooklyn Nets, the Charlotte Hornets, who you're in a playoff race for that play-in tournament, Oklahoma City, Portland, Miami back to back. So for the Celtics, this is a very important 17 game stretch because right now, as we're talking, they are in 5th place in the Eastern Conference. But if you go ahead and lose back to back games, you could very easily fall from 5th all the way down to 10th in the
Yeah.
Eastern Conference. So
Yeah. There's so much backlog in the Eastern Conference right now that you know, Brad Stevens had made comments about not necessarily playing for position right now. They just want to get into the playoffs, but they need to actually get into the playoffs. Like this has been the thing with this team all year. They're like, "Oh, we'll play our hardest when we get to the playoffs." Well, you have to actually get to the playoffs to play in the playoffs. And I don't think that always I don't think that they always recognize that fact. I think they think that, especially these young kids, that the playoffs are just going to be handed to them somehow.
you sound like such an old person right now.
Oh my God, I
These
know, but it
kids
bugs the
today.
and yeah, and honestly, God, they're all probably like a year younger than me. So I really shouldn't be calling them kids, but it blows my goddamn mind that they don't think the regular season is important at all. And neither does a coach, apparently.
I will say this though about the Celtics in the past few games. It looks like they're playing different brands of basketball. And granted, you can go ahead and say, yeah, it was against the New York Knicks, but that was a very talented defensive team with a head coach like Tom Thibodeau, who's very good
Mhm.
defensively.
Yeah.
That was a rock fight. You need to win those types of games.
Mhm.
Against Minnesota, that was a game that I think was completely mismanaged because they wanted to get Jason Tatum hit 50 points. They
Yeah,
screwed
yeah.
up ending the game and they ended up going to overtime. Luckily,
Mhm.
they held face there. They broke
Yeah.
Denver. And to me, I think if you go back and look and the Celtics go on a deep playoff run,
Yeah.
you're going to look back at that Denver game when they held the Nuggets to 8 points in the fourth quarter and
Yeah.
say that's where the season turned around because against
Right.
Portland, they did good defensively. They held Damian Lillard, I think, to what, 25 points or something like that.
Mhm.
But still, you held the backcourt combo of McCollum and Lillard down enough to win. And I
Yeah.
think the Celtics outsmarted the Portland Trailblazers, especially at the end of the game when Marcus Smart purposely missed that second free throw to kill the rest of the clock off.
Yeah.
All right, so that's our basketball conversation. Always stimulating conversation. I mean,
I mean, yeah, I'm
I'm
just
I'm
gonna keep
I'm currently
yelling.
battling for attention with the Boston Red Sox. Apparently,
I mean, you're not. It's, you know what? I just got like a 500 messages from Brian and Jeff consecutively, and I don't know what's going on, and that's what's been distracting me, not the Red Sox.
sure,
It
sure.
is. Check your Slack group.
I'm not a slacker.
Oh, you're a
I'm a
slacker,
hardworking person. I am not a slacker.
if you say so.
All right, well, that's our podcast for this week. Thanks for listening and watching us. We'll talk to you next week.